Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition and thinking about Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition from the perspective of a commercial entity, okay? And once we do that, once we're considering Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition as a commercial entity, what lessons can we learn from the James Bond franchise, which is at a critical juncture, all right? And they're navigating that juncture right now. And I think there are powerful lessons for the Dungeons and Dragons community to identify from the James Bond franchise right now in 2021, and then communicate what path we want Wizards of the Coast to take Dungeons and Dragons based on what we've learned from the James Bond franchise. All right, so when we look at the James Bond franchise, well, first of all, the reason we're looking at the James Bond franchise is I think the James Bond franchise is exactly what Dungeons and Dragons is. It is this corporate entity that blinks between relevancy and irrelevancy. Okay, so when we think about quantum mechanics, we think about quantum particles, and there's been a lot of study about quantum particles, what they do, what they don't do, right? And when physicists are studying quantum mechanics, they talk about quantum particles and the vacuums around them. And when they looked very closely at the vacuums around quantum particles, what they found was that they weren't vacuums. They were filled with this strange energy. And particle and antiparticle pairs were found, right? Is this blinking, this incredibly fast blinking phase between relevancy and irrelevancy. And I think that's exactly, and that's what Dungeons & Dragons is. That's what James Bond is. These are quantum particles. These are the vacuums between quantum particles that are showing this strange energy of particle energy and antiparticle energy, right? The void and the presence, right? And, and I really feel that Dungeons & Dragons, the complexity on it is so high, it clearly isn't being comprehended by most people, right? Most people think it's a game. I think it's a life path. That's a distinct difference, right? I have goals set for Dungeons & Dragons, and I want to be an active member of the Dungeons & Dragons community to accomplish those goals for Dungeons & Dragons. And I don't see myself as not having a right to have goals for Dungeons & Dragons. And the reason why is I think Dungeons & Dragons transcends Gary Gygax. It transcends TSR. It transcends Wizards of the Coast. It's an entity that will live past a single person and is going to live past whatever corporate owner it currently has, right? So James Bond is really unique, right, in this blink between relevancy and irrelevancy. So I just watched it. Spoilers for No Time to Die going forward. So the movie does two things. It is hyper modern, right? Has a female 007 for most of the film. At the end of the film, near the end of the film, she becomes not 007, right? She's like, I'm 007 for a portion of this film, and at the end, we want everybody to be clear. I, the new female 007, am no longer 007, right? But for a portion of the movie, 007 is female. That's hyper modern, hyper progressive, right? The movie also starts with Daniel Craig's, with James Bond in a paramour relationship with a woman we have never seen before in any film, right? And we're told by the writers this person's important to James, like one of the top loves of his life, right? Like, it's really important. Forget the fact that you've never seen this person in any other film, right? And then just like half the James Bond movies, she is used as a leverage point, right? If you don't do X, James Bond, this paramour who was literally introduced in this film, who the audience has never seen before, you just have to do everything in your life to make sure that she's safe. Super, super antiquated, super non-woke, super regressive, right? And so, and externally, people look at the James Bond film and they're like, "Are you kidding? Like, you want me to watch another series of an old white dude getting in relationships with young women, and then Also, tell me a story about espionage and James Bond is running around jumping and shooting and getting on boats, when the reality is we know the vast majority of espionage right now is done at a key click, and there's virtually nothing left for actual agents, right? Like, super irrelevant. And at the same time, right, so all that goes against the James Bond franchise, but at the same time, almost unquestionably, James Bond is the only actually successful espionage series to last past a single actor, right? You do have MI6, that's there, right? But is that going to survive the crotchety age of Tom Cruise, or is it going to survive? And is Tom Cruise have a small enough ego to turn this thing over to anyone else? Actually, I already tried to do this. That Jeremy Renner, it looked like they were going to try to say, hey, maybe we shouldn't have a 60-year-old spy, or maybe approaching 70-year-old spy, and we should turn this over to somebody who is believable jumping off of trucks onto other trucks, right? And so at that point, but that turned into Tears and Flames. So MI6 is arguably not even going to be successful. Dungeons & Dragons is exactly the same. It's flickering between irrelevancy and relevancy, okay? What's its irrelevant part? It's print-based, right? Like, first of all, D&D Beyond, forget it. Like, anybody who's got their head screwed on straight, they're not going to move. They're not moving to purchase anything on D&D Beyond, because you don't know if anything on D&D Beyond is going to be there tomorrow, right? Or if it's going to be in the same form it was tomorrow, right? You put a book on your shelf, you know what you got, you know what you own. Nobody's going to change it, right? D&D Beyond, who knows what you own, right? They can change it anytime they want. And I think most people who have their head on straight don't want that kind of product. They want a static product. They want to know the thing they bought yesterday is going to be there tomorrow. And right now, with Gleemax and the history of Dungeons & Dragons, I think a lot of people don't have confidence for that, right? So this thing is print-based. It also, not only is it print-based, but it requires massive literacy, right? We're approaching 30 books for the current edition, right? Bare minimum. Dungeon Master page read count is 750. Most Dungeon Masters today have 2,000 to 5,000 pages of reading on the current version alone, right? Incredibly antiquated, right? Pulling the game toward irrelevancy, right? However, from the relevancy perspective, Dungeons & Dragons is known worldwide, and it is right on the verge of releasing a massively important movie. And everybody's laughing. I get it. Everybody remembers the 2000, and they're counting it out before it's even done. But if this thing clicks and it works and it captures, and what if it falls at exactly the right time, when movie theaters are open and people want to go back? What if it's the first movie to crack $1 billion after the pandemic? Right? That's a huge thing that would make international news stories, and it could draw millions of new players to Dungeons and Dragons. That is the very essence of relevancy, right? That is, and in addition to that, Dungeons and Dragons is at the forefront of every major identity question today. They're talking about disabilities with disabled accessible dungeons. You have questions about identity that are being routinely explored in the Dungeons and Dragons game. There's questions about empathy. There's questions about exploration, right? Exploration is a pillar of the game in a time where the vast majority of our oceans and the vast majority of space are unexplored, in a time where we are very seriously saying people may not be able to live on this planet. You think exploration is important? And here you have Dungeons and Dragons, a specific cultural element that is calling people to hyper focus on exploration, right? And as the world is struggling, right, to have harmony over color, over preference, over gender, we have a game that's calling millions of players to say, hey, why don't you explore this gender? Why don't you explore this preference? Why don't you explore this race aspect, right? Different than your own, so that your heart can have more empathy, right? So I think the D&D community needs to look very closely at the James Bond franchise, right? And see what did they do right? What did they do wrong? They're in the same place we are, right? And so can we use either the loss of momentum or the gaining of momentum that that James Bond franchises have, boil that down into specific requests from the D&D community to Wizards of the Coast, because they are listening. We know this is a fact. We see proof of that in Wild Beyond the Witchlight. And can we get what we need to use either the failures or the success of the James Bond franchise to be free momentum for Dungeons and Dragons? I think we can. That's my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.